Just want to welcome everybody here. I'm Clint Tankersley. I'm the president of Reuben Clark Law Society, which is a brand new group here on campus. For y'all that don't know what we're about, we're passing around brochures and a handbill of upcoming events and stuff. But basically, we're all about religious freedom. We're not any particular denomination or creed or anything. We're just promoting religious freedom for all faiths and all groups. So you'll see us doing a lot of co-hosting events. We have one coming up on October 9th, on Tuesday. It's co-hosted with the Jewish Law Students Association. The speaker will be our own Professor Ryan Roberry, and he'll be talking about the Ford Motor Company and the Nazis. So, very intriguing topic. We'll be looking forward to that. But today we're honored to have two guest speakers with us today. I'll introduce the first speaker, and then Dean Timmons will introduce our second speaker. So first we'll have Mr. Mack Kruk, who just graduated last year from UGA, and he is now a clerk for our second speaker, Judge Mingledorff. So, without any further ado, have him.
Hey there. I'm grateful to be here and an opportunity to, as my assignment was, talk a little bit about one of my favorite subjects, which is myself. I guess I'm just here to talk about what my experiences have been in leading up to this clerkship and what that roles and responsibilities are with that. And in particular, probably, it's no secret that the market hasn't been as good as a lot of us hoped it would be. And some of the things I did to be able to land that position, as I'm sure we're all looking forward to being able to actually pay back some of those loans that most of us probably have been accruing over the last little bit, or beginning to accrue. In any event, you're probably aware I'm really just one or two steps ahead of where each of you are, just having graduated in 2011. And as such, there are a couple of, even though it's only a couple of steps, it's a couple of important steps. Taking the bar, landing your first job, and so hopefully I have a couple of little nuggets of insight that might be beneficial to you in your efforts to kind of do those things and take that next step. I'm going to start out with a slightly embarrassing admission, and that is I liked law school. I liked it quite a bit. That would tend to be uncommon as I interacted and spoke with my classmates. But there were certainly some anxieties of it, and the first year wasn't something I would stand in line to do again in particular. But at the same time, I really enjoyed exploring the issues, the ideas, the philosophies, the interests that go into resolving disputes. Because at the end of the day, that's what we do. A lot of people, when they think about lawyers, they think about the debate and the argument and all that. But at the end of the day, the judicial system is about resolving those disputes rather than prolonging them. And so I really enjoyed that process of exploring what all goes in with that. And for that reason, the judiciary is something that appealed to me. And when I found out, I think it was the summer before my first year in law school, started learning a little bit more about the position of a clerk. It's something that I certainly thought might be a possibility for me. As such, I also discovered that there was such thing as internships with the judiciary, something you could do while you were in law school. And way too late in the game, my first year, I started sending out some resumes and things to some judges. So that's maybe my first point of view is stay ahead of the curve. As soon as you get the chance to turn in some applications and resumes, send in those resumes to the judges. It'll increase the likelihood that you'll be able to land a position, even a volunteer position, with the judge if that's something you're interested in doing, and not just with judges, with anyone. The sooner you get that resume in, the better. But you know what? I got no results. There's lots of reasons for it. Sometimes there just was no office space for an intern, even a paid one. Sometimes that they were filled, and sometimes, the fact is interns aren't particularly proficient at doing the job they needed to do, and they can slow everyone down. In any event, that first year I wasn't able to land anything, and so I resolved I was going to take some classes, and in doing that, I had two reasons for that. In my summer after my first year, to be clear. In doing that, I had really two reasons for it. The first one was it would put me a little bit ahead I can lighten my load for the second and third year of my law school. The second was even just two classes, even in law school, was reasonable, and I could have a summer. And I spent a lot of time by the pool, and to be perfectly honest, I don't regret it. In any event, one of the classes I was able to take was a mediation class. It's something I would highly encourage anyone to do. There's so many beneficial things that you can learn in learning those skills of mediating. In particular, it forces you to see both sides of an issue, because in a lot of ways what you're trying to do is get the parties to see the other side of the issue in a less confrontational atmosphere. And even more than that, it forces you to be able to explain the other sides. And a lot of what you will do as an attorney, and certainly as a clerk as well, is not just to have your point of view and your objective. You have to be able to explain it. If you can't, you're not going to get anywhere. And so that was certainly a wonderful opportunity, at least for me, to learn some of those skills and polish some of those skills. Maybe most importantly, you learn, as I was able to actually practice some of those mediation skills, you learn how to tactfully approach people about subjects that are kind of sensitive to them. Usually people who are involved in the judicial system aren't there because they want to be. In fact, they're pretty frustrated that they are. And so having a tactful approach and discussing things with them is something that will help you in every aspect of your practice. I imagine it certainly has me. So I enjoyed that summer. I was able to practice some of those mediation skills in a setting, my second year of law school there with the clinics that they offer at the law school. And but I still wanted to work for a judge. That's when fortune smiled on me. I found out that a new friend of mine that I had actually started to become involved with through church as well, that his father was a judge. And in talking to him one time, he's like, asked me, because of kind of the relationship we had, is there anything I can help you with? And he says, and I say, yeah, as a matter of fact, there is. Could you ask your father if they are looking for any help this summer? I would be happy to give it. I'm in law school. He says, sure. He gets back to me and he says, the answer is yes, if you're willing to work for free. And probably some of you are familiar with the likelihood of getting paying jobs while you're still a law student. I was very willing to work for free. So that's how I ended up in the Piedmont Circuit working for Judges Mingledorff, Judge Booth, and Judge Motes. I am not sure what they expected of me as a volunteer intern over the summer, but what I do know is that I intended to treat it like a full-time job. And that benefited me too in a lot of ways. The experience was great, and it was two primary reasons it was great. First of all, the three judges that I worked for were extraordinarily approachable and willing to help me out. And you can imagine the anxiety. You're just an intern, you don't really know anything, and of going in for a judge and laying work on his desk saying, this is what I found out in my research. It wasn't too long where I was very comfortable doing that, knowing that maybe my work still needed some improvement and all like that, but I knew that the judges would be willing to help me improve in that. And so if any of you have the opportunity to have a similar experience, I certainly hope it's similar in that way, and that you're working for judges that are very helpful in that way. The other reason is because I had a clerk that was extremely experienced, and he was willing to let that experience be whatever it was for me that I wanted it to be. And basically I told him, I want to do your job. And he said, all right. He just laid the work on me, but he was my filter from the judges to me and from me to the filter. And so again, it's a situation where it was very beneficial to me to have someone who really knew what he was doing, but to let me learn at my own pace. I let him know the first time I put a draft order on his desk. Feel free to do whatever you have to do with it, revise. It's not going to hurt my feelings, not to be pride. And he said, okay, sure. And it looked like he had spilled his vein on that piece of paper of my draft order. And but I got better. And so that's certainly a piece of advice. I know I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but any opportunities you have for people to look at your work and critique it, embrace it. It is how you got better. And the fact is, by the time I was done with that internship, after only a couple of months, I was extraordinarily more well prepared than I had been 2 months previous to do the job that I'm doing right now. And the judges seem to know that as well. Having said that, I knew I wanted a clerk at that point. Before, it was something that I thought strongly about. Now I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted a clerk. And so found myself in a situation where, all right, I'm going to apply for some jobs. I got some interviews my third year of law school. Nothing very materialized. I was actually planning on taking the bar in Tennessee and practicing there. That's where I'm from originally. But those plans fell through, and I found out, unfortunately, that Georgia has one of the earliest bar application dates of anyone in the country. So that's maybe the biggest piece of practical advice on you is, as you're approaching into your third year, that character and fitness application is due very early on. Make sure that you take it. I was in a situation where I even petitioned the bar application to let me to let me take the bar in July, even though I had turned in a late application, and they politely told me, no thank you, see you in February. And so I was in a situation where I didn't have anything to do. Once again, fortune smiled on me, and a bankruptcy internship was open in Augusta, which is where I grew up. And so I was able to go into the bankruptcy court, and it's a very unique situation in bankruptcy court because most of the issues that come up are handled between the party applying for bankruptcy and the trustee. If anything actually comes before the court, it's usually pretty juicy, something that some intelligent minds weren't able to come to a conclusion on. And in addition to that, my judge was very particular. She was very blue book oriented. She was extraordinarily sweet and very much knew how to treat people. But she knew what she wanted, and she had her very polite ways of pointing out when what you had offered her wasn't quite adequate to what she wanted. And once again, it was a great opportunity to hone my legal analytical skills. Got a little bit of mediation work in the fall, spent all of January and February studying for the bar. You all have that to look forward to. I'm glad it's behind me. And in any event, I got a call literally the day before the bar results came out from Judge Booth, who in the circuit was responsible for hiring clerks. And he said, if your name's on the good list tomorrow, come see me. So when I saw him the next week, because as luck or blessings or whatever else you might want to describe would have it, my name was on the list of having passed the bar. He sat me down and he said, well, this is a position, this is why it's becoming open, it's yours if you want it. Now, that was the sowing, I guess, or the reaping of what I had sowed earlier as a volunteer internship. He sought me out to hire me because I had been willing to get my foot in the door and to do, whatever I could to show that I was, at least moderately competent. And I tell people, that the devil, or I've heard at least before, I think it was this situation, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. And so at least I was a known commodity to the circuit. And that's why they were willing to hire me with very little process in terms of getting to know me, because that process had already been taken care of. Well, in my last few moments here, and I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for Judge Mingledorff, I want to tell you about why I love my job, because I do. I really, really love it. And I'm going to start with an anecdote. Judge Booth rolled into my office the other day. He literally rolled. He's actually disabled. He's in a wheelchair, but he's an amazing legal mind and grasp of the law. And he, as he slid in there, he started laying stuff on my desk. And one was a judgment on the pleadings where the answer may or may not have been deficient, and there was new case law regarding what the judge should do, how much they can point out or should point out regarding what a defendant can do to fix a deficient answer. And then there was a credit card issue where an individual was divorced, and although his name was on the account, he had never used the credit card, and he was defending that. It was pretty gray on exactly what to do with there. There was a fraud case where an individual had basically filed probate papers saying that he was the only heir when in fact he had 2 living siblings, and now they were trying to figure out if they needed to add the lawyer that helped him file the papers as a defendant. And then another damages action between MCI and Verizon versus the Georgia Waste system, where apparently they had severed some fiber optic lines, allegedly. The first thing I thought as he laid all this and said, have a nice day, was, yikes. It was a lot of stuff, and I knew it would take a lot of time. But in all honesty, and I'm not just saying this because I'm up here trying to paint a happy face, the reality is, for me, that's really awesome that I get to stick my thumb in that many different pies, and particularly at this point early in my career, really taste and develop a little more sophisticated of a palate, if you will, of what I like, what I don't, what I can do, and all those things. And so to me, that's one of the best things about clerking, is just the diversity of the legal matters that you're invariably going to handle. Another thing that's great about it is the resources. I don't have to worry about how long I'm on Westlaw. It's all there, it's all free as long as I need to be on it. And in addition to that, the judges, in my experience, like I said, there's so much experience that I can draw on. Their experiences, not only dealing with the law, but also dealing with people, each of them at practice before they came. And I think law school does a pretty good job, at least my experience, of teaching you how to look at the law. There's not a lot of opportunities to learn how to handle people and interact with people. But the judges have a lot of those experiences that you can lean on and draw on. And finally, one of the best things is time. And this, certainly we have deadlines at times, but generally speaking, we have time to really look at an issue and really examine it from all sides. The premium for an attorney too many times is to get the work done. Get it done, get it turned in to the judge. The premium for us is to get it right. And in general, we have the time to do that. Another story, I had Judge Motes had a hearing one time. This was when I was interning. And it was just a really, really difficult will case. And so he had handed it to the clerk, and it sat on the clerk's desk for 3 or 4 months. And he handed it to me because he had a new, fresh set of eyes to take a look at it. And sat on my desk. I worked on it off and on for several hours at a time for a couple weeks, and then all of a sudden we heard that maybe there was going to be a bar complaint about how long the judge was taking to decide on this case. And because my eyes were the freshest, I was tasked with the responsibility to draft the memo. And it wasn't easy to tell the judge at the end of the day what I feel like you should do is rule and say that this case that has been clearly overturned wasn't actually overturned for the right reasons. The judge's analysis in the past was incorrect, and in reality this case is still good law, and it controls the holding of this situation. But after I had just beaten into my head and we had all discussed this, that's the reality of what we wanted to do. And I don't think Judge Mingledorff knows this. One of the first things I did when I got this full-time position is look up that case to see what the appeals court did. And sometimes you get it right. And the appeals court was like, yeah, you know, that case is still good law, even though for the past couple decades it's been said that. We were able to do that because we had the time to really analyze the situation. And I guess that's what I want to leave you with. And I hope I haven't taken up too much of the judge's time. I know he has many more I think beneficial things to share with you. That's certainly been my experiences than what I can share. But one of the great things about it is earlier in your career that you can really take the time to hone those legal analytical skills that you're going to need to depend on as you continue to practice. I can imagine a better position than a clerkship to do that. And so I certainly thank you for your time, and I think we'll have some time for questions later, but hopefully some of those things were beneficial to you. Thank you.
Thanks. I just wanted to come and welcome all of you and welcome the judge on behalf of the College of Law Administration and faculty. We're excited about a new student organization. We're proud of Clint for the efforts that he's put in. It's the Monday of the second week of classes, and you're having an event, which is terrific. And I want to thank Judge Mingledorff for coming today. He has practiced law for over 25 years. He's been a judge, a Superior Court judge since 2008. I think he probably has a lot of useful things to tell us all. And I'm hoping that he'll do some sharing about how his own sort of sense of ethics and justice has maybe developed since he's been in the position of a judge. But thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing from the judge. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Currie Mingledorff. It's good to see you. Appreciate you being here. Let me just quickly see by show of hands, how many of you are first-year law students? Well, welcome and congratulations to you. Second-year law students? Any third-year law students? Okay. All right. Well, I want to congratulate, first of all, I want to say thank you to Dean Timmons. Appreciate you having me and having Matt here. And also thank you to Professor Roberry. There he is. Professor Roberry, thank you for inviting us. And Clint, I was reminded of an experience today as I drove here. One of the reasons why I brought Matt, and he may have figured this out by now. Of course, I really did appreciate his remarks, and I hope that you found them beneficial. I think they would have been very beneficial to me if I were sitting where you were today. But I told Matt that I lack a sense of direction. And coming into, and it's just true, it's just the honest goodness truth, I just was born without a sense of direction. So whenever I come to Atlanta, I just get all turned around. And it used to be, I did a little bankruptcy work in my practice, And every now and then I'd pick up a case from the Atlanta division of the Northern District. And you know, that's fine. I didn't mind having, I generally handled just simple Chapter 7 cases. I didn't mind picking up a new case. That's how I made my living. But the problem was this. Some of you who are new to Atlanta may not have ever heard of Techwood Homes. Anybody here ever heard of Techwood Homes? All right. Well, let's just say, for those of you who haven't heard of Techwood Homes, that that's the place where they had drive-by shootings and everything all the time. Whenever I came to the bankruptcy court in the Atlanta division of the Northern District, I kid you not, I ended up in Techwood Homes every time. So I was talking to a buddy of mine about that. I said, you know, I picked up another case, and man, I hate going into Atlanta. I always end up in Techwood Homes. He said, well, why are you going to Atlanta? And this fellow's a good friend of mine, okay, and a very good bankruptcy lawyer. In fact, such a good bankruptcy lawyer that does trustee work, okay, but mostly in the Middle District. He says, Currie, don't you know that these venue issues these venue requirements in bankruptcy court are really more or less disregarded today? He says, it used to be, back in the old days, that, you know, creditors were all local, but now they're national. You know, they're credit card companies and this and that, and they're all national. And he says, you know, we just file it wherever it's most convenient, as long as it's in the right district. And I just said, that is the best news I've ever heard in my life. And I went, got the paperwork ready, headed on to Gainesville, which was not Atlanta, and I filed the papers, got there, and there was a lady there. It was lunchtime, and she wasn't the lady who normally took the paperwork. And I handed her the paperwork, and because the other lady was at lunch. She says, well, don't you, you know, I'm looking at this, it looks like this is an Atlanta division case. And I said, oh, don't worry, honey. No, I didn't really say that, but I was thinking, you know, don't worry, I know about this, and I know you're not the one who normally does this stuff, and I've got it worked out, it's just fine. Okay, I'll take it. And it was just fine. Until I think it was about maybe 2 weeks later, maybe a little less than that, when I got a letter in the mail, and it was from Judge Brizendine. And I thought, well, this is nice. And he wanted me to come to Atlanta and explain to him why I should not be held in contempt for intentionally filing in the wrong place. And let's just say my professional life flashed before my eyes, and I learned a valuable lesson. And by the way, I did go. I took my partner with me, who held my hand, and I explained to Judge Brizendine without telling on my friend, who meant well and who actually gave me the correct information for that time. Now I don't know if they still do. You didn't hear that from me. I don't know if they still don't care about that as much in that district. But I took responsibility for it. Judge Brizendine took pity on me really, and said, well, please don't do that again. And I said, don't worry, I won't. And so I thought of that, and I thought of the whole notion of in reflecting on that, I thought about what that experience did for me. Before I go into that, before I kind of get to one of my points today, I want to say to you that you're fortunate to be law students today. That you can read in various places in the press, as I have, that a law degree, there are some who say that a law degree is a bad investment today. I personally do not believe that. I think that a law degree gives you skills and tools that are beneficial to you in so many ways that it's not a bad investment. I think that one has to be wise, and I think you've been wise, and that's another reason why I want to congratulate you, because I happen to know that Georgia State has been rated as one of the best law school values in the country for at least a couple of years. I've seen a publication about that. Did y'all know that? I assume you know that.
Oh, yeah. We're pretty proud of it.
Yeah. that's a big deal. It says a lot for this school. It says a lot for you. And I congratulate you for being here. You know, Professor Millich would not know me from anybody. But I tell you, Professor Millich, more than anyone, deserves some kind of an award for having personally shepherded the first major revision of the Georgia Evidence Code through the legislature and the governor's office since like 1863, something like that. I assume you all know that. I assume you know that. You should be proud to be associated with a school where Professor Millich teaches. Like I said, he wouldn't know me. Somebody else that another reason why I think highly of this law school is that I had the opportunity for 22 years to be associated with a fellow whose name is John Russell. Now, John Russell would be embarrassed if he knew I was talking about him today. But he is a nephew of a fellow whose name was Richard B. Russell Jr. Anybody ever heard of him? He was a senator in Georgia for about 50 years. And a lot of things are named after him, including the Russell Federal Building, a couple of blocks from here. John, I think, became the youngest person ever elected to the legislature at the time he was elected to the legislature back, I think he was 22 or something like that. He rose to the position of majority whip. He actually made a run for the United States Senate and lost. And he decided to go to law school. And he came to Georgia State. And he got his degree. He got out a year after I got out at the University of Georgia. And we, in about a 5-minute conversation, formed a professional association called Russell and Mingledorff. And we stuck together for 22 years. And John Russell is one of the most humble people I've ever known in my whole life. You wouldn't know that he had this background, that he had all these things. He was a very humble man. And I want to speak to the subject of humility for a minute. The J. Reuben Clark Law Society has a what is it, a theme, I guess. It is a mission statement or something. We affirm the strength brought to the law by a lawyer's personal religious conviction. Let me stop there for just a second and say that when you go to law school, when you become a lawyer, you're not supposed to somehow become a robot. You bring all the experiences, you bring all of your values, you bring things with you. And that brings value to your profession. It brings value to the community. It brings value to your church or synagogue or mosque. Let me continue the rest of the, it's just called a mission statement. We strive, we affirm the strength brought to the law by a lawyer's personal religious conviction. We strive through public service and professional excellence to promote fairness and virtue founded upon the rule of law. Now that is a lofty mission statement. And I want to just pick up on one aspect of this that kind of came to my mind as I was thinking about this, and maybe it's because I was thinking of John Russell and his great example. I saw an episode the other night. I know you guys are just young kids, basically. You've probably never heard of the Andy Griffith Show. Some of you have, right? Well, I was watching Andy Griffith the other night, and some of my favorite episodes of Andy Griffith usually are where Barney Fife is prominently featured. And Barney Fife, of course, was his deputy that, carried around a gun, but he had, one bullet in it, I think, or he kept it in his, I can't remember. And he really was kind of a bumbling guy, but he loved being a deputy sheriff. Well, Barney is walking along downtown Mayberry with Andy, and he sees this guy standing there by the storefront, getting ready to smoke a cigarette, and he drops the cigarette wrapper on the ground. Well, what does any self-respecting deputy sheriff named Barney Fife do? He goes over and accosts him and tells him, you just threw that on the ground. What's wrong? What did you do that for? And he decides right then and there he's going to issue a citation. By golly, I'm going to cite you for this. And he starts writing it up. And little does Barney know that this guy who he's writing the citation for has really just escaped from prison, and he's a big-time bad dude, all right? And just at that moment, here comes the state patrol, and they're looking for this guy, and they see him, and the guy says to Barney, look, let me just give you some money, and we'll just call this up. And he's trying to get out of there. They end up getting their feet tangled up, and Barney ends up on top of this guy, and the state patrol pulls up, and here Barney has just he's just got the big dude. He's just arrested him, and so all of a sudden Barney's a big hero. Okay, Barney's all of a sudden the big hero. And what does Barney Fife do, right? I mean, those of you who are Andy Griffith fans, he's got the great mannerisms, why we love Barney. And he starts having this swagger about him, and he starts sniffing, like he does, and it goes to his head big time. And I thought, well, what does that have to do with lawyering? And I decided, it has a lot to do with lawyering, because the skills that you're gaining here at the law school are teaching you something valuable that are going to make you a star in some ways, on some occasions. You're gonna find, for example, that you might win the case that you really thought you should have lost. Well, what does that do for your ego when that happens? You might find that you do better on a test than you really realized that you were going to do. You might find already, because you're in law school and your friends are coming up to you, asking you for legal advice like you've been practicing for 50 years. It might start going to your head a little bit. And I want to, and I don't want to leave transaction lawyers out. You may have drafted a really great contract. Or close the big deal. How about that? Close the big deal. I say that tongue-in-cheek. I say it tongue-in-cheek because I went to law school to become a transactions lawyer. I ended up litigating for 22 years in the courthouse all the time in various counties, and I just never was a transactions lawyer. But and now I can't imagine being one. But I say all of that to say to you that as a lawyer, one of the tools that you need, that I would hope that you would cultivate in your life and in your practice, is humility. And I would promise you that if you try to cultivate that, I would even encourage you to pray for that. And if you do, you'll be blessed with experiences that will help you to have that. Like, for example, when I was first starting out, I had a client. It was my best client, my main client. And they paid me a significant retainer every month. And I just couldn't believe it. That I was out of school now, and I was getting paid. Like, Matt, paid for doing this. And they called me one day, and they said, "We need you to come up here right now." And it was lunchtime. I was leaving late. Thankfully, my home was on my way to this destination. I went by, grabbed a quick peanut butter and jelly sandwich, ate it in the car, get up there, see my most important client. And the CEO of this company was a lady. She looks at me, and we're talking a little bit. And she says, "Is that peanut butter on your face?" Okay? Humility experience right there. If you pray for them, you'll get them. I went to court without my belt one time. Self-conscious about that. I just forgot it. I just forgot my belt. And T. Penn McWhorter, who still works as a senior judge there, I go out and I'm doing my thing. He says, "Well, good afternoon, Currie. This is an open court. Can I buy you a belt?" And I guess in sharing that, I just want to encourage you to cultivate a little humility and an ability to laugh at yourself a little bit, not take yourself too seriously. This is serious business, Professor Centel, illustrious torts professor at the University of Georgia, used to say that, you know, we have to look for the humor in the law wherever we can find it. And he was sure right about that, because I'll tell you, this profession, just like law school, can just chew you up, spit you out, and burn you up. And we don't want burned out lawyers. We want lawyers who understand they have an important role to play and they're striving to play it. And one of the ways to do that successfully is to have humility. I had a bunch of things I was going to say about balance, about the quest for balance. I think it's life's greatest quest. Anybody in here, any of the law students married? Anybody with children? All right. You know, I wasn't going to say this, but actually I applied to Georgia State when I got ready to come to law school. And I was accepted. Okay. And I'm from Athens. And I held out for Georgia. One of the reasons why I held out is because I was married. My sweetheart and I had one child and another on the way. And to be honest with you, we knew we would never find a place in Atlanta as cheap to live as the trailer park we were living in Athens, okay? And so we hung around, we stayed in Athens. My wife and I went on, by the time I finished law school, let's see, our second child was born mercifully, in Christmas break, the first year. Our third child was born the day before classes began, our third year. My sweetheart and I have been married now for 30 years, and we have 10 children. Now, I don't necessarily recommend 10 children, but I tell you that so that you understand that this business of balance is something I've thought a lot about. And I want to just give you a couple of little pointers. You know, you can have the best law practice in the world. If you lose your family, you know, what does it mean? You know, the most important, there's a quote, the most important of the Lord's work, and I would say the most important of any kind of work you or I will ever do, will be the work we do within the walls of our own home. And I would encourage you to think about that and cultivate some balance as you strive in your practice or in your life otherwise to make sure you don't neglect the essential things, because you've got important things to do. And some of the ways I would suggest you do that, even in law school you can do this. You know, if you've got somebody at home with the kids or somebody else at work while you're at school or at work, you know, give them a call at lunchtime. Just check in with them. Do everything you can to be home at supper time. There are almost magical things that occur if families eat together. And there have been a lot of studies about that. I would urge you to try to make that a priority. You know, in my case, thankfully my sweetheart was able to be home. We did without a lot of things, but when I came home, you know, I understood my role was as the relief crew. And on a particularly difficult day, and believe me, there's no harder work than being a full-time homemaker. I mean, there's just no more harder, challenging, menial work, but important work than doing that. And there were a time or two when I'd get home, and Mama would hand me the baby and keep on going. And, you know, I'd come in the house and I'd take over. You know what? That was fine with me, because I understood she needed a break, and I was happy to give her a break. It's in the home where we can cultivate a really important skill for lawyering, and that skill is listening. If you really want to be successful as a lawyer, as a judge, or anything else in this line of work, I can't think of a more important skill. And it is a skill. And it takes practice. And by the way, I'm still practicing. You can ask my sweetheart. I'm still practicing. I'm still working at it. But but listening, learning to really listen. You have a challenge that I didn't have as a law student and as a young lawyer, and that is the abundance of technology. You know, you probably heard a lot about this, but there's so much technology today, and it's so loud that if you're not careful, it can interfere or completely impede your ability to listen to the things that are most important that are going on around you. Let's see. You know, I hope that you understand that if you can make it through this process, get your law degree, that's a great blessing to you. It's a great honor. But I hope you understand that more than being a blessing, more than being a great honor, it's kind of like what comes with your law license. Really, more than anything, it's a license to serve. You know, there are lots of scriptures that talk about lifting up the hands that hang down, strengthening the feeble knees. You know, if there was ever a profession that is able to do that, and many are, certainly the law is among them. Because we have the privilege of many times facing individuals who come to us in their time of utmost extremity. And we have the opportunity to help them, to lift them. Boy, what a privilege that is. But if we're not looking at the law as an opportunity to serve, then we're probably in the wrong profession. Let me share with you, just in closing, a couple of experiences I had where this theme comes through. One is I had the opportunity to serve a mission, full-time mission, for my church for 2 years. I served in Japan. I learned to speak Japanese, and it was great. I came home, I finished undergraduate school, got married, went to law school, and I was practicing in Winder. And there was a fellow there who frequently would appear at arraignment day. Now, arraignment day, as most of you probably know, that's the day in criminal court when folks show up and they're going to, answer whether they're guilty or not guilty. And usually there's a big crowd there, and they go through it. Well, there's this guy. His name is Mr. Yu, and he, for lack of any other way to put it, he was really the town drunk. He was Korean. And I was walking through court one day, and Judge Brooks, who's no longer there, pointed at me and said, how about talking to this guy? And he knew that I spoke some kind of Asian language. Well, Japanese, Korean, it's all the same, right? Well, as it turns out with Mr. Yu, it kind of was all the same, because he had been a kid during the occupation of Korea and was compelled to learn Japanese. So he and I spoke a little bit in Japanese, and I got to know this guy some. And I just was pressed in the service. I represented him pro bono, and he ended up getting whatever he got, and then he was back, again the next time. And Mr. Yu, he's the town drunk. Why should I be worried about him? Well, for one reason, because Judge Brooks asked me to. But once that was over, it was over. As you will have the opportunity to do from time to time, I took an interest in this fella. And I would love to tell you that he reformed and became something else. He really never did. I represented him over and over again, and I learned about him. I met his family, met his children, found out that he was trained as a pharmacist. He'd come to the United States for opportunity. He had to work on licensing and those kinds of things, as you might expect, coming from a different country. But while he was working on those things, he took over management of a convenience store. Well, while closing up his store one evening, early on when he was here, he was confronted by a robber who stabbed him multiple times and took his money, robbed the store, and left him nearly dead. And he was in the hospital for like 6 months and had tremendous pain from the scars, the incisions, and so forth. And one of his relatives said, you know, you need to get out of the hospital and just try some of this wine. He wasn't much of a drinker before that. Try some of this wine, and that'll help. And he told me himself. He said, you know, I like the wine. And he'd been drinking it ever since. And, you know, I think of Mr. Yu, and I think, well, you know, how is Mr. Yu different from me? You know, he's not. But for the grace of God go any of us. And I think as a lawyer, it's healthy to have that point of view. I will tell you the last little anecdote, I guess, about the highlight of my entire career as a lawyer before I became a judge. And I did a fair amount of domestic relations work. I did general practice. But many domestic relations lawyers that I know are not, well, many of them will do this. You come in for a divorce, that's fine, I'll visit with you, but let's talk about this. Are you sure you want to do this? You know there are other things you can do. You can go to counseling. You know, what about your kids? You know, and there are a lot of lawyers who do that. And I always made it my practice to do that. Well, not long before I became a judge, I'm standing in line at the post office. And some lady that I did not know comes walking up to me. She says, "Are you Mingledorff?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she says, "Well, can I see you for just a minute?" Okay, it's fine. You know, more free legal advice here at the post office. Just comes with the territory. and so, you know, as soon as I get done with the line, I'll come out there and I'll see you. And I go out there. I go out there and I see her. And she says, "Listen, I just wanted to tell you, thank you for saving my marriage." And I'm thinking, well, who are you, lady? and you know, to this day, I don't know her name. Her husband had come to see her. And I had done what I always did. I just had the little chat with him that usually didn't do anything, or so I thought. And but yet, he had listened. Because family is important to me, because I conveyed that sentiment to him, because that's part of my faith, he had taken it to heart. And he had gone home and told his wife, maybe we can do something to save our family. And by golly, they did it. And I tell you, that is absolutely the highlight of my 22 years of practicing law. I want to encourage you to consider your moorings. Consider whatever your faith. Consider what that means to you. And don't divorce it from your professional life. There's absolutely no reason to do that. I promise you that if you'll do that, you will be much happier as a lawyer. You'll be much happier as a human being. Your family will be much more stable, much more secure, and thank you very much for letting me speak to you today. I understand there might be some questions, and I would invite Matt to come up too if he'd like to come up. If, I don't know how much time we got. We've got about 10 minutes, something like that. If you don't have questions, that's fine. I'm happy to stay for a few minutes and visit with anybody who might want to ask me anything privately. And while you're thinking, if you've got questions, let me say one thing I didn't really have time to talk about. One thing that's not taught too much in law schools, to my knowledge, is this thing that we call accountability courts. One of the things, and frankly this has something to do with the subject matter we've been talking about, one of the things that has been my privilege to do as a judge over the last 4 years has been to create in the Piedmont Circuit the very first 4 accountability courts that the circuit has ever had. We now have a drug court in Barrow County. We have a drug court in Jackson County. We have a mental health court in Barrow County, a mental health court in Jackson County. It's my privilege to preside over those courts, which I do along with the rest of my caseload. Those courts are designed to take folks who, frankly, are filling up our jails and our prisons and do something helpful for them and for society. These courts, just raise your hand if you've never heard the words accountability court together like that. Please raise your hand. Don't be embarrassed, please. I had never heard. I had an experience as a lawyer. Some guy came to me. He said to me, and I'm doing a legitimation for him. He wants to have visitation with his kids. The process of getting to know him. He says to me, I used to be a meth addict. And in fact, I used to sell some meth to support my habit. And I'm thinking, I'm sitting here looking at this guy. He's paid me a significant retainer. I know he's living in a stable home. He is in college. He is working. And he's trying to step up and be a man for his child. And I'm thinking, am I hearing what this guy's saying? And he goes on and he says, the best thing that ever happened to me in my entire life was that I got arrested and I got sentenced to drug court in the Hall County Superior Court. And to that day, which has been, I don't know how many years ago. I don't remember this guy's name even. I had never heard of a drug court. But at that point, I had heard all that I needed to hear to know that these courts can work miracles. I couldn't believe it. I had known meth addicts. I represented meth addicts. These people were out burglarizing houses and stealing copper and shoplifting and all these other kinds of things. And how's it possible to take someone like that and turn them into this guy who's sitting in front of me? Well, we had the opportunity to apply for a grant just as I was coming in. And we have the distinction in the Piedmont Circuit. At the time I came in, we were per capita the busiest circuit, per capita, meaning for each judge, we had the largest caseload of any other circuit in the state. Most, as I understood it, most Superior Court judges had a caseload pending at any given time of about 2,000 cases. Well, ours were 3,200 cases. So our judges had looked at it and said, you know, maybe we can get somebody, a trial administrator, to help us with this, with our courts, if we do this drug court thing. And then they found out, well, you know, that doesn't come with a deal. And they decided, well, we just can't do it right now. Well, when I came to them and said to them, well, I shared that anecdote with them, told them about my client. They were immediately willing to give me time, or at least to give me encouragement, because we all kept the same caseload, but to give me the encouragement and the support to do that. And we got a grant, and we figured out an innovative way with the help of our 10th District Trial Court Administrator to take a grant that was designed to create one drug court and actually create 4 accountability courts. 4 accountability courts. And these courts, in the drug court context, for example, they take an addict who's facing significant jail or prison time and give them, if they meet certain criteria, they can't be a sex offender, they can't have committed a serious violent crime. Otherwise, they can be multiple felons. But they have to decide that they want to go this route instead of prison. But if they decide they want to go this route, then they come in, they have to meet with me in the courtroom every week during the first phase. And the other phases, they back it off a little bit, every 2 weeks, and then finally in the last phase, once a month. And they get drug tested 2-3 times a week, randomly. They have a curfew, and they have to be home. If they're not, you know, we got the sheriff. We got a team. It's not just a judge. We've got the DAs at the table. We've got the public defender at the table. We've got probation at the table. We've got a sheriff's deputy at the table. And we've got a treatment provider at the table. And all these people and a few others are at the table. And we have staffings on these folks. The sheriff's going out to see if they're home. And after, after several weeks, a few months, their heads start clearing up. And they begin to engage in most cases in treatment. And it changes them. They come out at the end of it after 2 years, and they don't even look like they used to look. The same is true with and I forgot a really good part. It costs less than prison. It costs less. One of the very few things that Democrats and Republicans agree on is drug courts. I encourage you to learn about them. You can do that by going to allrise.org. or not mental health courts, about veterans courts, other problem-solving courts, as they're called. Well, I'm going to sit down, and if anybody has any questions or whatever, just let me know. Thank you so much.